On the morning of December 7, 1941, at 7:48 a.m. local time, Japanese forces launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. naval base on Oahu, Hawaii. The attack consisted of two waves of aircraft from 6 Japanese aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku. A total of 353 Japanese aircraft participated in the assault, 183 in the first wave and 170 in the second wave. These aircraft carriers and over 420 embarked planes constituted the most powerful carrier task force assembled at that time. The Japanese force had departed under great secrecy on November 26, 1941, commanded by Vice Admiral Chuichi Nogumo. The strike force included not just the 6 carriers, but also 2 battleships, 3 cruisers, 9 destroyers, 8 tankers, and 23 submarines in a forward screening position.
The attack killed 2,403 Americans, 2,008 Navy personnel, 109 Marines, 218 Army personnel, and 68 civilians. An additional 1,178 people were wounded across all services. 8 American battleships were damaged or sunk. The USS Arizona exploded after a bomb struck its forward ammunition magazine at approximately 8:10 a.m., killing 1,177 of its crew, more than half of all American deaths that day. The ship's remains still lie in Pearl Harbor waters. The USS Oklahoma was struck by multiple torpedoes and capsized, trapping many crew members inside the upturned hull. Of the 1,353 personnel attached to the Oklahoma, 429 were killed. Rescue parties cut holes in the hull and saved 32 men over the following days. In total, 188 aircraft were destroyed on the ground and in hangars. 21 vessels were sunk or damaged, including battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and other ships. Japanese losses were remarkably light, fewer than 100 personnel, 29 aircraft, and 5 midget submarines that attempted to penetrate the harbor.
Despite its tactical success, the attack failed to hit several crucial targets. All 3 U.S. Pacific Fleet aircraft carriers, USS Enterprise, USS Lexington, and USS Saratoga, were at sea and escaped damage. By the 1940s, aircraft carriers had become more important than battleships, though this wasn't universally recognized at the time. The massive fuel storage facilities at Pearl Harbor, containing millions of gallons of oil, were not targeted. The submarine base was ignored. The repair facilities, shipyards, and dry docks remained intact. These omissions proved crucial. American technological skill and the undamaged repair facilities allowed the U.S. to raise and repair all but 3 of the damaged ships. Only the USS Arizona, USS Oklahoma, and the obsolete USS Utah were not returned to service.
Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto conceived and championed the Pearl Harbor attack, though he opposed war with the United States. Yamamoto had studied at Harvard University and served as naval attaché in Washington, giving him deep insight into American industrial capacity. When asked by Japanese leadership about a potential war with the United States, Yamamoto made a prophetic statement: "I shall run wild considerably for the first 6 months or a year, but I have utterly no confidence for the second and third years." Yamamoto believed military victory in a protracted war against an opponent with America's population and industrial advantage was completely impossible. He warned that Japan could not win a prolonged conflict. Getting approval for the Pearl Harbor operation was difficult. In meetings on October 17 to 18, 1941, Yamamoto threatened to resign, along with his entire staff, unless the plan was approved. The Naval General Staff found this threat unthinkable and approved the operation. The attack was designed to achieve tactical surprise and destroy American battleship power, theoretically giving Japan 6 months to consolidate its Pacific conquests before America could respond. The theory assumed American public opinion would force negotiations after a series of defeats.
President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress on December 8, 1941, calling December 7th a date which will live in infamy. He declared that the United States had been suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Congress declared war on Japan within hours of Roosevelt's speech. Germany and Italy, Japan's Axis allies, declared war on the United States on December 11, 1941, bringing America fully into World War II on both fronts. The attack unified American public opinion in ways Japanese planners never anticipated. Before Pearl Harbor, a Gallup poll found that 52% of Americans expected war with Japan, but the nation remained deeply divided on foreign intervention. The surprise nature of the attack. Japanese diplomats delivered their declaration of war after the bombing had already begun due to decoding delays, made Pearl Harbor appear as treachery. This gave the United States an enormous moral advantage internationally and became a perfect rallying cry for the American war effort. Tensions between the United States and Japan had been building for years. Japan's invasion of China in 1937 and its alliance with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy in the Tripartite Pact of 1940 alarmed American officials. In July 1941, the United States severed commercial and financial relations with Japan, froze Japanese assets, and declared an embargo on shipments of petroleum and other vital war materials to Japan. This embargo threatened Japan's economy and military, as Japan produced essentially zero oil domestically and depended entirely on imports. Japan's leaders viewed the American embargo as a threat to national survival. They resolved to seize the resource-rich territories of Southeast Asia, particularly the Dutch East Indies oil fields, even though this would certainly mean war with the United States. The Japanese saw the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor as the main obstacle to their Southeast Asian expansion. Yamamoto's plan aimed to neutralize this threat with a preemptive strike. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, in June 1942, the Japanese and American navies clashed at Midway Atoll, a small dot of land in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. This battle proved to be the decisive turning point of the Pacific War. American codebreakers had cracked Japanese naval codes in early 1942, giving the U.S. advanced knowledge of Japanese plans. When Japanese forces sent a false message that the base at Midway was short on fresh water, American intelligence confirmed that AF, the Japanese code for their target, was indeed Midway. The Battle of Midway began on June 3, 1942, when American forces first spotted the Japanese invasion force. The main carrier battle occurred on June 4, 1942. In the morning of June 4th, Japanese aircraft from 4 carriers attacked the base on Midway Island. Unbeknownst to the Japanese, 3 American carriers, USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and USS Yorktown, were positioned just to the east, ready for battle. American dive bombers struck at approximately 10:22 a.m. on June 4th. Within 5 minutes, they had hit 3 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, setting them ablaze and turning the tide of the entire Pacific War. The 4th Japanese carrier, Hiryu, launched counterattacks that severely damaged USS Yorktown. American dive bombers from USS Enterprise then found and destroyed Hiryu in the afternoon. Japan lost all 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, along with 1 cruiser, 292 aircraft, and approximately 3,057 men.
All 4 of these carriers had participated in the Pearl Harbor attack just 6 months earlier. The United States lost 1 carrier, USS Yorktown, 1 destroyer, 144 aircraft, and approximately 362 men. More critically, Japan lost over 100 highly trained pilots who could not be replaced. Japanese naval aviation had begun the war with approximately 3,500 carrier pilots trained for years, arguably the best in the world. These losses were devastating and irreplaceable.
On April 18, 1942, 16 American B-25 bombers launched from the aircraft carrier USS Hornet, approximately 650 miles from Japan. Led by Lieutenant Colonel James H. Doolittle, they struck Tokyo and other Japanese cities in a daring raid. The raid was conceived as retaliation for Pearl Harbor and to boost American morale. President Roosevelt had encouraged military leaders to strike Japan as quickly as possible. The B-25 bombers were too large to land back on the carrier after the attack. The plan called for them to continue to friendly airfields in China after bombing their targets. The task force was discovered earlier than planned by Japanese picket boats, forcing the bombers to launch 200 miles farther from target than intended. Despite this, all 16 aircraft successfully took off from the Hornet's deck. The physical damage inflicting on Japan was minimal. Some buildings destroyed, approximately 50 civilian casualties, but the psychological impact was enormous. The raid shattered Japan's sense of homeland invulnerability and proved American carriers could strike Japan itself. The raid forced Japan to keep aircraft and troops in the home islands for defense, resources desperately needed elsewhere. Most importantly, it prompted the Japanese High Command to accelerate plans for the Midway operation, which ended in catastrophic defeat. 15 of the Doolittle bombers were lost. 1 landed at Vladivostok, where the Soviet Union interned the crew. 8 American airmen were captured by Japanese forces. 3 were executed in October 1942. 1 died in captivity, and 4 survived as prisoners until war's end. Japanese forces retaliated brutally against Chinese civilians suspected of helping the American airmen. This campaign devastated entire villages in Zhejiang and Jiangxi provinces, with casualties estimated in the tens of thousands.
The vast disparity in industrial capacity between the United States and Japan became the decisive factor in the war. Japan's economy was a fraction of America's size, its industrial capacity perhaps 1/10 of America's, and its population less than half. In 1939, before America entered the war, U.S. military aircraft production was less than 3,000 planes annually. Japanese factories produced about 5,000 aircraft in 1941. By 1942, the first full year of American participation in the war, U.S. production soared to approximately 47,000 aircraft. In 1943, production exceeded 85,000 aircraft. In 1944 alone, the United States built more planes than Japan produced during the entire war, from 1939 to 1945. American shipyards turned out vessels at astonishing rates. America launched more ships in 1941 than Japan did in the entire war. By autumn 1943, all Allied shipping sunk since 1939 had been replaced. In the 3 years following Midway, the Japanese built 6 aircraft carriers. The United States built 17 fleet and light carriers during the same period, plus numerous escort carriers. American industry provided almost 2/3 of all Allied military equipment produced during the war. 297,000 aircraft, 193,000 artillery pieces, 86,000 tanks, and 2 million Army trucks. From January 1, 1940 to August 14, 1945, the United States produced 300,317 military aircraft. Factories ran 24 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. By late 1943, the aircraft industry employed 2.1 million workers, including tens of thousands of women. President Roosevelt set ambitious goals after Pearl Harbor.
60,000 aircraft in 1942, and 125,000 in 1943. 120,000 tanks in the same period, and 55,000 anti-aircraft guns. In 4 years, American industrial production, already the world's largest, doubled in size.
At the start of the Pacific War in December 1941, Japan possessed the third most powerful navy in the world and the best naval air service. The Imperial Japanese Navy had 6 fleet carriers and several light carriers, a formidable force. But Japan faced insurmountable strategic problems. The nation's entire economy depended on imports: oil from the Dutch East Indies, rubber from Malaya, rice from Indochina, iron ore from multiple sources. All had to be shipped through waters increasingly dominated by American submarines. American submarines began strangling Japanese merchant shipping early in the war. In January 1942, Japan lost 15 merchant ships. By June, they were losing 30 ships per month. By August 1942, the rate increased to 40 ships monthly. Japan could build perhaps 200,000 tons of merchant shipping per year. They were losing 300,000 tons per year by mid-1942, and losses were accelerating. At this rate, Japan would not have enough merchant shipping to maintain basic economic function by 1944, much less support military operations. Japan's conquests in the first 6 months of war created a defensive perimeter thousands of miles long, requiring forces dispersed across dozens of garrisons, many in isolated locations, difficult to supply and impossible to reinforce quickly. The Americans could concentrate their forces and choose where and when to attack. Japan had to defend everywhere. This fundamental asymmetry meant that even with equal forces, America had the advantage, and forces were far from equal. Japanese pilot training could not keep pace with losses. At the start of the war, Japanese naval aviation began with approximately 3,500 highly trained carrier pilots, with an average of 800 hours of flight time. By August 1942, roughly 40% of these irreplaceable pilots had been killed at Coral Sea, Midway, and in the grinding Solomon Islands campaign. The survivors were exhausted, flying multiple missions per day with inadequate rest. Japanese training programs produced perhaps 100 new carrier-qualified pilots per month, but these pilots had only about 200 hours of flight time compared to the 800-plus hours the veterans possessed. American pilot production told a different story. The United States trained thousands of pilots monthly. While their training was initially less intensive, the sheer numbers meant American losses could be replaced rapidly. In the autumn of 1942, a typical U.S. Army Air Force pilot went to the front line with 300 flight hours. The Battle of Midway cost Japan over 100 of its best pilots. At current attrition rates, Japan would run out of experienced carrier pilots by mid-1943, regardless of how many carriers they possessed. The Imperial Japanese Navy would train about 2,000 new pilots in 1942, but by summer of that year, an estimated 85% of naval pilots still met the expert standard of more than 600 flying hours. This percentage would decline catastrophically in subsequent years.
The famous quote attributed to Yamamoto, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve," has no verified historical source. Historians have found no contemporary evidence that Yamamoto said or wrote these exact words. The quote first appeared in the 1970 film Tora, Tora, Tora. The film's director stated that producer Elmo Williams claimed to have found the line in Yamamoto's diary, but this has never been verified. What Yamamoto did say to Prime Minister Fumimaro Konoe
in mid-1941 was documented. I shall run wild considerably for the first 6 months or a year, but I have utterly no confidence for the second and third years. In a reply to Ogata Taketora on January 9, 1942, Yamamoto wrote, "A military man can scarcely pride himself on having smitten a sleeping enemy. It is more a matter of shame, simply, for the one smitten." In a letter to retired Vice Admiral Teikichi Horii on November 11, 1941, 4 weeks before Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto expressed his personal anguish at executing a strategy he opposed. Among the American casualties were extraordinary acts of heroism. 15 Medals of Honor were awarded for actions during the attack, more than any other single day in U.S. military history. Chief Water Tender Peter Tomich aboard the USS Utah sacrificed his life to secure the boilers and enable his crew to escape before the ship capsized. Chief Boatswain Edwin J. Hill cast off the lines as the battleship Nevada got underway, then swam through burning oil to get back aboard his ship, where he was killed by Japanese strafing after saving many junior sailors. Ensign Francis Flaherty and Seaman First Class James Richard Ward aboard USS Oklahoma sacrificed their lives holding flashlights so turret crews could escape before the ship capsized. Doris Dory Miller, a messman 3rd class aboard USS West Virginia, helped move the wounded captain to safety, then operated a Browning .50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun until out of ammunition, despite having no training on the weapon. 9 Honolulu Fire Department firefighters responded to burning facilities during the attack, becoming the only fire department members on American soil to be attacked by a foreign power. Fireman Harry Tuckley Pang was killed by Japanese machine gun fire, and Captains Thomas Macy and John Carrera died battling flames inside a hangar.
Pearl Harbor achieved tactical brilliance but strategic catastrophe. The attack was designed to demoralize America into negotiating peace, but instead created absolute determination to destroy Japan completely. American war bond drives were oversubscribed. Factories converted to 3-shift war production. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. American public opinion, previously isolationist, unified completely behind the war effort. Pearl Harbor gave America the moral high ground internationally, making it easier to build alliances and secure resources. The attack appeared as treachery, a violation of international norms, providing perfect propaganda value. Japan handed America a rallying cry that sustained the war effort through 4 years of brutal Pacific fighting. The phrase, "Remember Pearl Harbor," became ubiquitous in American culture and military motivation. Yamamoto's personal prediction proved accurate. Japan ran wild for 6 months, achieving stunning victories across the Pacific. But after Midway in June 1942, Japanese offensive power was broken. The war became one of grinding attrition that Japan could not win. By late 1944, Japan's economy was collapsing under the strain. American submarine warfare had cut oil imports to levels insufficient for military operations. Japan had captured the Dutch East Indies oil fields but could not get the oil home. Admiral Yamamoto himself did not live to see the final defeat. On April 18, 1943, American codebreakers intercepted his flight plans. U.S. Army Air Force fighters shot down his aircraft over Bougainville Island. Yamamoto was killed, dealing another devastating blow to Japanese morale. Pearl Harbor brought the United States into World War II and set in motion the events that led to Japan's unconditional surrender on August 15, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The attack that was supposed to prevent American interference in Japan's expansion instead guaranteed Japan's total defeat. The sleeping giant, awakened by Pearl Harbor, produced an industrial and military juggernaut that Japan had no capacity to match. Today, the USS Arizona Memorial stands over the sunken battleship in Pearl Harbor, visited by over 1 million people annually. The names of the 1,177 crew members who perished are engraved on the memorial's marble wall. Pearl Harbor remains etched in American memory as a day of sacrifice, heroism, and the beginning of a war that would reshape the world. The attack demonstrated that aircraft carriers, not battleships, would dominate naval warfare, a lesson written in fire and blood across the Pacific. December 7, 1941, a date that will live in infamy, changed everything.